This is Resonance 104.4 FM. That's inflation for you. I'm Nick Hennegan. Satsukal, Naramushka, Salam Alaikum, Morad Bab, Ambinya. Welcome to another edition of Literary London, where we talk not only on bohemianbritain.com, but on YouTube as well, because if you're listening in stereo, you can probably see us. Oh, yes. We're in vision again, as often or occasionally happens. And I'm very pleased to say my beautiful guest this edition is none other than the writer Sam Cullen, who, literary London, we can't get more London than this, really, has written a brilliant book about London's lost pubs. Hello, Sam.
Good afternoon, Nick. And I thought you were talking about someone else when you introduced me in such a warm way, but it is me. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and of course we know each other now because we did a little session at the Chiswick Book Festival, which was rather good fun, wasn't it, on stage? And I
Yeah,
think in the bar afterwards as well. Yes,
yeah.
briefly.
Well. I think it's what they call a professional debrief, isn't it?
That's exactly right. Spot on. Yes, I shall write that one down for later. Yes, it was marvelous. So, we'll talk a bit about you as well and your writing process. But I mean, the books, in a sense, it could be quite a negative thing because you're talking about pubs in London that are no longer here anymore. But it's
Yeah,
not, is
yeah,
it?
but it's not exactly, Nick. Without, referencing the people who've made an awful lot of money this year on a comeback tour, it is very much don't look back in anger. It's very much a celebration that the places exists in the first place. Um, and it goes back 20 to 25 years. So I haven't been to some of them. I think it's to just make sure they aren't forgotten. And it's looking back at the curious characters that inhabited them over the years and shining a light and making sure we remember about them.
And how many pubs are there in the book?
204. It would have been 205, but somewhere reopened during the editing process, so I took it out. It's presently shut again, but I am told it will reopen. So I had to be honest and take it out. So it's 204 across all 32 London boroughs and the City of London as well. So there's a good geographic spread.
I mean, we must talk. Obviously, we'll talk about the pubs themselves. But what gave you the idea to do this in the first place?
I think I'd previously co-written a book with a good friend of mine called Watching the London Pub Name. And it looks like where the pub names come from and the etymology and what they link to local history. And in doing that, I'd always been looking for the pubs with interesting names, and inevitably, quite a few popped up that were no longer with us. So I sort of had them, put them to one side. You end up with a list of a dozen or so, and you think, oh, that's a shame. Well, it'd be interesting to write something about them. And also I looked and saw no one had done it. There were excellent books about London's lost music venues by the fantastic Paul Talling. Lost Rivers, he also does Derelict London, but there wasn't something solely pub related. And I thought, well, I think I'd find it quite interesting. Hopefully other people find it interesting. So I thought, why not give it a go myself?
And it must have been. I mean, how did you do the research? Because obviously the pubs are no longer here anymore.
It was a mixture of I leapt back through the archives and looked at quite a few what I call classic pub review books going back from the 30s onwards. And that would give you quite some of the flavour of some of the colourful ones that are no longer with us, because the ones that would pop up and you'd be able to sort of say what someone said in the 60s and 70s. Places like the Red Lion on Waverton Street in Mayfair, and then obviously much more famous ones that everyone probably could name, including one of the ones on the cover, Jack Straw's Castle up in Hampstead. But yeah, I drew on those sort of sources, sometimes first hand, look, reached out in a not a huge, but in some occasions to sort of local Facebook groups, and people would come forward saying, "Oh, I used to go here, I used to work here." So it was always peppered because none of the entries are simply, the old Red Lion. It opened in 1888. It shut in 2012. It's now Tesco Express. It opened during the 60s and 70s. It was famous for this. Then it closed. So everything's got a little bit of a story, and everyone I included had to have a little bit of colour to it. It couldn't merely be it opened, it was open for 100 years, and it shut. So they've all got a little bit of character, a little bit of a quirky tale to sort of bring them to life.
And that's, of course, the attraction of the book, really, isn't it? I love the fact that you felt like you could have been there. And I gather because you say you got some first-hand experience as well, didn't you? People would be in touch
Yeah,
with their
yeah, no,
life stories, as you just said. And there was an
yeah.
old
I mean,
chap. There was an old chap who got in touch. I seem to remember you saying
he
the other day.
was. He's no, so that's sadly no longer with us. But this guy Pete Jacobs, who used to be a regular at the Cartoonist, which was in the City of London, right near Fleet Street. So that's where all the cartoonists would go from the newspapers, and it's actually named after those sort of cartoonists. And they had their annual sort of meeting there every year, and the winner of the Cartoon Society Award of the Year often got a chance to do. They changed the pub sign every year. I don't think that went on forever, but for a while they did that, and then they had a party one year where they brought a bear in. That a bear had been in an advert that had escaped, so that was the cartoon of the year, and they
This
were
was a
said,
real, a real, a real
a
live
real
bear.
bear,
Grr, grr,
yeah, yeah. And it was
grr.
about 30. They were 30 minutes away from being arrested by the City of London police under like the Dangerous Animals Act before they put it back in its cage, as it was just right, here in this pub just off Fleet Street. So yeah, he got in touch and recounted what it was like there, and told me some of the stories. So that it's really touching, it's really nice to sort of. 'Cause a lot of it is it's social history,
Yeah.
it's how it connected to communities and stuff. So that's what I really wanted to bring alive, really.
And there seems to be a little bit of a political movement with, with a small p, even recently here. I mean, obviously people listen to this at various times and in various places, but in the UK at the moment, perhaps some recognition that the more connected we are with phones and, Zoom calls and things like that, the more important it is that we have that sort of face to face, or that interface, really, that kind of real. I think the princess, what's her face? The princess has just been sort of talking about how phones
Yeah.
isolate people, and I suppose pubs, in that sense, are perhaps. Would you say they're enjoying a bit of a renaissance
I,
politically,
I think so.
perhaps?
I think so. I mean, you've got to look at. I think there's even been an announcement today about encouraging them to stay open for a couple of hours extra, and I think that's what I sometimes pick up from people who come from other countries or other cities, and they come here and they think, London is a busy, vibrant city, but our pubs close. I mean, they close later than they used to, but not many have really exploited 24-hour drinking, have they? It doesn't feel like many go much beyond 11 p.m. But you're right, there does really seem to be a real significance and interest in preserving them, as community assets, as many of them are indeed designated as a community value, which gives doesn't always work, but it gives the community a fighting chance of hanging on to it and avoiding it being, converted into something else.
Yeah, I suppose it's excuse me. It's always this. What people tend to think about with pubs is drinking, of course, which of course is what
Yeah.
they're there for, and that's how they make their money. But there are, I mean, in my experience, as I run a thing called the London Literary Pub Crawl, as you know, and that attracts people every week, and the reputation of British pubs really across the world is quite special. I mean, it took me by surprise when I first started doing the literary pub crawl. I mean, not just the fact that we're in pubs where all these kind of famous writers used to sit and drink and create, perhaps, but there's a real warmth. I mean, particularly North America. A lot of Americans will come here for the British pub experience, and I suppose it's something that we should perhaps be aware of. It's not just about the booze, really, is it? And I
No,
must
no.
ask you as well. Well, I've got to get onto your favourite pubs in a minute, but
Yeah.
just about because it's literary London, and of course we have a lot of writers who listen to this. What was your writing process, actually, sort of getting the book done? I mean, what
Oh,
programs did you use? Are you long-handy? I mean, I guess because there's so much research, you would have had to be fairly digital about it.
yeah, it was. I sort of went to when I was going to the archives and stuff. I was sort of scribbling down notes, which obviously I'd go going back to look at like a few weeks later. Go, what on earth have I written there? And end up having to go back a second time. But it was a lot. There's a lot of source-based stuff. So I had my sort of notes and threw it all together. It helped because the way I've organised it is geographically in A to Z. So I had my entries and sort of shifted them around a bit, but I sort of did bits, and some bits I did really early on, some bits I did later on. Then I go, oh, I probably need one or two more in a certain area, and I go, well, I really need to, leave no stone unturned to maybe include one or two more from say Harrow or one or two more from Barnet, because I wanted to get that geographic spread, and it was sort of just totting up the entries. But as I said, it started from sort of going to the archives and picking out the key quotes and the things that I could, well, that adds a bit of colour, and then sort of weaving my intro and narrative around that. But the entries are of varying length. Some have got lots to say, some are a bit more succinct. But so it was sort of dependent on the source material.
Yes, and you write. Do you use a particular program for writing?
No, no, I just put it through words. I'm not I'm not glamorous. No, if anyone could suggest any better, please do. No, I just whacked it in Word, and did that. And then as it got towards the end, I was like, oh, where might there be photos? And I was sort of trying to guess that and think, well, that breaks that bit up, that breaks that bit up. I didn't do the formatting, the publishers did, but I was started to try and visualize it in my own head. So yes, that's how it all came together, really.
And how long did it take you from, I mean, let's
Oh,
say initial idea to the final draft?
well, I think I pitched the idea in like Feb 2023 and sort of got a green light to do it by March. I probably started writing, doing the research in April, and I put in a first draft, there's sort of revisions, first draft on Halloween 2023. So it's a spooky evening to get that in. But there was on and off, but then I sort of it was there was a sort of real push towards the last 6 weeks or so. So what had been a summer of sort of taking days of work to do some writing and getting distracted because the weather was too nice. In September, I'm like, no, I'm really going to get down to this now. So September and October were the quite right. I've got all the notes here. Just get on with it. Let's put stuff in, and that was a sort of quite intense 6 or so final period, 6 or so weeks. Going through early drafts and stuff.
Yeah, there ain't nothing like a deadline, really. So,
No, no, no. Even if to some extent it's a self, you could always shift it for a couple of weeks. But I thought, no, 31st of October, that seems quite solid. We'll go to that.
And did you kind of, I mean, I get that completely as well, the idea when you take time off to do some writing, because you've got a proper job as well, haven't you? You've got a real
Yeah,
job.
yeah, yeah. No, this is very much on the side. But yes, so we sort of tried to do potato, but you sort of sometimes if you take time off and just have a whole day off, you don't really get much done anyway. So in the end, weekends were my, being quite disciplined on a Saturday morning and sort of thinking, let's just crack on and do because it's only a finite amount, as I'm sure everyone from listening that you can do in a day. And sometimes it helps to have the structure of doing something else first, doesn't it? Whereas if you give yourself a whole day free, then you end up procrastinating. Whereas at least got to do this between 10 and 2 or 10 and 3, then go off to do something else.
Yeah, because sometimes you might not have the right cup of coffee, for instance. You might be in the wrong. I'm joking
Thumbs
slightly.
in the wrong place.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yes, I was chatting to, I'm talking about you, Steve. Stephen Jackson is a writer mate of mine in the Midlands, and we were having a chat about just that very thing about deadlines this weekend. Yes, that was very pertinent. I'm Nick Hennegan. I'm talking to the author, Sam Cullen, who has written a book called London's Lost Pubs. And we're in Vision as well. We're not only are we on YouTube, but we're also on bohemianbritain.com, which I think is going to be renamed literarylondon.com fairly soon for some reason. Don't forget, if you'd like to get in touch, as always, if there's anything happening in the region, although, as you know, we often spill outside of London, then do get in touch. You can get me, as always, at radio@mavericktheatre.co.uk, radio@mavericktheatre.co.uk. Or, oh, I've got my own now, yes, Nick, Nick, at bohemianbritain.com. Ooh, yes. Nick, Nick, Nick at bohemianbritain.com. And I'd have to say hello as well to Kath in California. She's been in touch. Hi, Kath. I haven't heard from her for what, 3 weeks? Kath has been emailing for a long time, and she apparently always listens to the show on the beach. Yeah, I mean, I just like to believe that. I like to think that we're actually in America now. Yeah, and Cass looking out to sea and thinking about London pubs. So um, we've got to come into the kind of the meat of the matter, really, and that is the pubs themselves. So, um, gosh, did you have a favourite? I mean, it's like choosing a favourite child, isn't it? Or is it what were the stories that really stuck and resonated with you? Because you're a London boy as well, aren't you? Yeah,
Yeah, well, I'm originally from Brighton, but it's not far, is it? So it's sort
that's
of
it.
London by the sea almost. So, but
Yeah.
I've been here for the best part of 20 years. It's a very good question. I think it varied. I'd love to have gone to. I'd love to go to the Paver Arms, which was an Art Deco pub just off Westminster, and the description of it at the turn of the century, so the 2000s, was I think someone like Time Out may have called it London's most complete Art Deco pub, and it had like the uplights, sounded like it had like nice red seats or mirrors, and all the different bits. Like there was the restaurant bit and the saloon and the stuff, all of that. I would have liked that because I'm fascinated by architecture as much as I'm fascinated by pubs, and I think that would have really, uh, I would have really been taken by that. I think also, as I say, some of those city ones, I'd have been quite curious to go to the cartoonist and run into some of the cartoonists like sketching away the political shenanigans of the time. And a sort of mixture. I think. obviously, for bizarreness, I would like to have gone to that pub, the Georgian Dragon, off uh, just off Black Prince Road in Vauxhall, the one that had a swimming pool in its back garden. And it's well worth, if you go onto YouTube after watching this, watch this in full. Make sure you've caught up with all of Nick's episodes. But once you've done that and you're waiting for his next exciting instalment, look up Georgian Dragon Public Houses Thames. And there's an old 1983 news report about how a pub in Vauxhall puts a swimming pool in its back garden. And it is absolutely fantastic. And I think God knows what that would be like, but those sort of tickled me, stuff like that. Maybe Old King Lud that was up by near Blackfriars, Ludgate Circus, especially if I'd gone in the 80s when Dale Winton did a stint as a DJ there for a couple of months. So I'd have liked to see Dale Winton on the decks. He did an interview with The Sun in the 90s, called it the most dodgy, depressing place he'd ever been into, but he lasted 3 months there. So yeah, I think those are a selection of them, and obviously experience the fullness of Jack Straw's Castle. Because that's obviously got a tremendous amount of literary collections. From Dickens, Dracula, all those things that comes up being up on the heath. I think I'd like to have gone to Jack Straw's Castle as well. I may have once sat outside with our going to the chart, but I definitely never went inside. So I'd like to have experienced a bit of that. But lots of them, I think, apart from one or two of the ones that sounded a bit more edgy, maybe not the barge pole in Thamesmead, or the one you told me about Nick, that you went to, the Wat Tyler in Kidbrooke. Maybe I would have not minded giving them ones a slightly bit of a miss.
Yes, I did have an interesting night there a few years ago. It was actually a few years ago, in the 70s. Yes, yeah. I think, yes, that's right. I was with some ex-dockers and we had to leave because apparently someone had just robbed Harrods. I don't quite know. So this was about 2 o'clock in the morning, but yeah, it was marvelous. I suppose that I mean, are there any particular human stories or particular individuals that stand out to you from the book?
There was one that jumped out, and this was a pub in Chelsea that I think would be quite interesting to go to, called The Man in the Moon. It had a theatre upstairs, so it would have appealed to you, and it sounded very ornate. But I picked it a couple of references to various Evening Standard pub guides. They did some in the 90s. And in the first edition of one of the 93 or 94, they describe this man who goes there and drank 10 pints a day, and he was a regular there. And then in a later edition, they it had some changes made. So he didn't drink 10 pints a day there anymore. He'd taken his custom elsewhere. But I said, blimey, I mean, the fortitude he must have had at this sort of it didn't say if he subsequently went to the show, so I'm not sure whether the performers upstairs would have welcomed the presence of him there after his 10 pints. But yeah, you sort of get that sense of some of the characters involved and the people that frequented these places. Probably more those the sort of locals rather than as fun as it would have been to someone like the Intrepid Fox, in Soho, where apparently Mick Jagger and Rod Stewart almost came to blows over band members when Rod Stewart thought, I think it was Mick Jones being poached from the Small Faces to join the Rolling Stones. I mean, it'd be interesting to see them almost coming to blows in the pub. But yes, yeah, I think that would also be quite interesting in its own way.
Yeah, and other pubs that are sort of geographical. Well, I say geographical pubs. Pubs. I mean, because was it the first Irish pub was on Fleet Street, apparently, and
They
the Polish.
claim
Yeah,
And I think that was one where, as someone who's certainly passed fairly recently, who wrote some, Martin Cornell, I think his name is, he's written some really super books. It was, yeah, the Tipperary claimed that, and he did some, it's a very old historic pub, but not as an Irish pub. And he'd gone back to the censuses about it with Old Boar Street and this and that. But yeah, they're fascinating, the ones that, the sad were the ones that have been there for hundreds and hundreds of years ago. There was one, the Tiger Tavern which was rebuilt in the 60s, but was by the Tower, the Tower of London. And that had all these sorts of stories about allegedly there was a tunnel when Queen Elizabeth I, not second, was in the tower under the Queen Mary, and that her pet cat was in mummified, all this sort of weird stuff that you're not sure you believe or don't believe. And only it was rebuilt in the 60s, and they had this bizarre ceremony where they checked the beer was all right by having someone sit on the seat and they'd sort of pour beer on the trousers. And if they got up and they didn't stick to it, the beer was good. And if they did stick to it, or vice versa. But there was definitely something whereby I think the Lord Mayor of London may or may not have been involved, but it definitely, maybe there was some sort of guild for beer and the guild. But yeah, this happened in this Tiger Tavern. So all the sort of funny sort of customs that happened in some of these places. I think would have been quite fun to see. And then one that actually wasn't too far from we just referenced Chiswick. There was a pub in Chiswick called the Coach and Horses. During the 70s, they put a stream in it. We've heard of theme pubs before, but stream takes it to another level. I'm not sure if that was a particularly successful innovation. Yeah, there was a that was briefly a stream pub in the Coach and Horses on Chiswick High Road, which is gone now, but the building in its place effectively has kept the frontage. So you'd look and think, oh, wasn't that a pub? But not anymore.
Yeah, I did quite. I mean, again, staying in West London, which is where I'm lurking, there's the Raven. I think we popped in there, didn't we?
Yes,
From me,
we
a,
did.
a pre-briefing. It was a pre-briefing,
A
and I quite
pre-brew.
like the fact that there was the maternity hospital around the corner, which is now flats, of course. And one of the owners, I think, probably in the '60s, opened a book because the husbands tended not to be there for the birth of the child. They'd be in the pub. And he actually got this kind of, I forget what they call it now, a stalk book. They've actually still got them. They've still got records
Yeah,
of the people that were in there. I think Zach Stark even, I think Ringo Starr was even in there
blimey.
at one point and signed it. And that, again, it was just a lovely little thing that again, like you say, from the social history point of view,
Yeah.
is quite important. I mean, and so what's next? Are you going to do part two, I suppose?
I don't know. I mean, it'd be nice to do it the other way and say celebrate pubs that have reopened, because obviously some do that. I don't know. I'd like to do something else about pubs. It's always interesting to write about pubs, but I think there's all different things that go on. And maybe the best way to decide what to do next is to do some more field research in various many different pubs. But there's all sorts. I mean, I did want to think you could have ones at extremes, like, but it would cost a lot in travel. What is the most westerly pub? The last one by Land's End, and then one up by blustering at John O'Groats, then off at like be up to like the Outer Hebrides and stuff. But that would be a bit that's more logistically tricky than as big as London seems. It's easier to get to Upminster than it is to Orkney and stuff. But yeah, something curious, something that sort of makes people think. Encourages people to go to the pub, but also makes them think about, because as you say, it's not just it is so much of a drink if you want it to be, but it can be plenty more than that if you want that as well.
Yes, I mean, we do a Shakespeare's birthday pub crawl, which is slightly surreal because, of course, we don't know a whole lot about Shakespeare anyway. But we start around the South Bank and the Tabard Theatre, of course, where the short Chaucer
Yeah,
started off. And then we end up at the what's it? The black, not the black, by the tube station. It's the the Friar, Blackfriar. Blimey, I
the
knew I'd
Black
get
for
there.
excellent. Yeah,
Yeah, near Blackfriars. And I was quite, I mean, the thing that struck me when I first saw that, when I was doing the research for the Shakespeare tour, was its shape, because it's like a
it's a
wedge.
wedge, isn't it?
Yeah,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
of course, there's nothing around it
No.
that makes it need to be a wedge. And of course, I found out then that, of course, it's because the whole area was redeveloped, but the pubs managed to survive. And
Yeah.
I gather it was they were going to knock that down as well, weren't they, at one point, apparently? And it was
And I think that was saved by Betjeman,
John
wasn't it? I
Betjeman,
think.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the poet laureate as well, and it is
Yeah.
beautiful inside. I mean, if you
It
get a
is
chance
fantastic.
to
That
go.
back room, isn't it? That you I don't want to say too much because I like people to have that sense of wonder when you go in and you look at what I'm not now going to describe, but people do go into the back fire, do go into the back room, admire it, and then chuckle at the details, but it is quite something. But watch yourself when you get the steps down to the toilet because they are a bit tight.
Yes, there is that. That's the other thing, isn't it? London pubs. Yes, I know. I think there's a bylaw in Birmingham which means the toilets have to be on the same level. I don't quite know where that's come from, but yes, you can. It's if you've had a fairly heavy night, occasionally they are a little bit cosy. But it's yes, and of course the yes, the Blackfriars is a lovely place to go to. Are there any others favourites that you've got at the moment that are still
That are still
running?
with us.
Yeah,
I think I mean, I'd love to live up there, but there's a couple of nice ones I'm really fond of up in Highgate. There's a very nice pub called The Restless in Highgate, which is very pleasant. It's also by obviously a very nice 30s sort of modernist, sort of post Art Deco block of flats. And I think the dream would be live in that and have The Restless as your local. I love the Grapes is great in Limehouse, the one that's co-owned by Ian McKellen. And you
yeah,
might see him on occasion doing the pub quiz. That's great. Representing, obviously, I quite like a really nice pub in Putney called the Bricklayers Arms, where you can get all the Tim Taylor landlord beers for the listeners up in Yorkshire. Representing, that's a really nice mix, and it's a mix of all ages. Like you've got your ale fans and your younger folk, and I think that's also my favourite type of pub, where you get that whole. microcosm of people coming together. And I guess another one to say that we're going into the autumn. The Plume of Feathers in Greenwich, just by the edge of Greenwich Park, is a cracking pub. It's got a lovely little garden, cracking cosy inside, and a slightly moody but very adorable pub cat called Matey. You've got to watch yourself with him. Don't stroke him if he doesn't want you to stroke him. But yeah, the Plume of Feathers in Greenwich is good because also it's a little bit further away from, because if you ride by the Cutty Sark, those get absolutely round. Understandably with tourists. If you go up more towards Maze Hill Station, you'll find the Plume of Feathers, and that's a cracking pub, well worth a visit.
Yes, the Raven has a slightly difficult pub cat as well, by all
Yeah,
accounts. Well, that's brilliant. Oh, thank you. Thanks so much for this. So the book is called London's Lost Pubs. It's by Sam Cullen. And where can we get hold of it? And who's published it? You got the details, Sam?
it's published by White Owl, who are part of Pen and Sword, so you find it on the Pen and Sword website, as well as being available from there. It's about 20 odd Waterstones across London. So if you live in London, you might find it at your local Waterstones. It's in a handful of Daunt's other independent bookshops as well, and obviously online through via the usual suspects. But if you don't want to support sending Katy Perry into space again, then maybe support a more local thing. But you can get it in plenty of places across London.
And any information? Have you got your own website, Sam? I forgot to ask you this.
I haven't. So you might find me on
Okay.
sort of social media on X for my sins, and if you do find me on there, um, and if you do get the book, I'm always curious about what stories touch people the most because I know what my favourites are. But the interesting thing about doing this is the ones that capture other people's imagination, and that's what I'm just so curious about. So if anyone, if people buy it, do let me know which ones touch you or which ones you had a bit of personal connection to.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sam. And of course, if you want to get in touch here, you can radio at mavericktheatre.co.uk. If you've got a favourite pub, radio at mavericktheatre.co.uk. Or you can get me now personally, Nick at bohemianbritain.com. Nick, Nick at bohemianbritain.com. And that's all we've got time for. Thank you so much for your time and your talent, Sam. It's a fantastic book. I loved reading it. And I shall see you next time. I'm Nick Hennegan. This is Literary London, not only on bohemianbritain.com. We're in Vision, of course, on YouTube and in bohemianbritain.com, but chiefly Literary London on Residence 104.4 FM.